Welcome, everyone, and I am Barbara Layton. Welcome to part two of our show today, Muslims and Jews, Let the Healing Begin. This is a conversation that asks not what divides us, but what unites us in our most vulnerable and authentic moments, with the intent to understand, have a conversation, a radical act of empathy in a world that so desperately needs it. Jim?
Absolutely. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. And thank you both for being here. We're going to introduce you right now. Our first guest will be Dr. Asal Rasheed. Dr. Rasheed and her family have made Southampton their home since 2010. Her husband, Dr. James Groff, who was on our first segment, is the only dual certified, board certified critical care general and trauma surgeon on the East End. They have two wonderful, beautiful young boys, Lake and Liam, who attend Sagapona's Little Red School. I find that just wonderful. It's one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Asma has a successful concierge practice in Bridgehampton and Palm Beach, where she offers highly personal medical services to a diverse patient population. She's been internationally recognized for her breakthrough work during COVID, which is, I guess, returning, right?
Yeah.
So
A lot more work to do.
more breakthrough we need, okay. And Rabbi Jan Herbach is with us. She's the founding rabbi and spiritual leader of the Gesher Bridge Shul.
Gesher the Bridge Shul.
Gesher the Bridge Shul, got it, all right. Jan is also the director of the Block Conquer Center for Spiritual Arts at the Jewish Theological Seminary, where she served as interim dean of the Rabbinical School. She's published widely, served as scholar in residence at the 92nd Street Y, the Skirball Center for Adult Learning, the Women's League for Conservative Judaism, and many synagogues in the area. She is a graduate of Yale University, Harvard Law School, and served as law clerk for federal judge Kimba Wood. Wow, so you are both quite accomplished and incredible guests. And thank you so much for coming on the show
Thank you
and
for having me.
having the courage and having that conversation that Barbara is talking about that's so desperately needed.
We actually met in one of those conversations.
Yeah.
We met.
Where was this?
There's a very strong interfaith group in the Sag Harbor, Bridgehampton area, and there's been an interfaith Thanksgiving service for years, and we met that night.
Yeah.
Which was
Thanksgiving,
5-6
almost.
weeks after October 7th, and we had this beautiful, warm, lovely program. It was terrific. And we were waiting around afterwards. And I just felt that we couldn't just have all this nice, smiley, happy, isn't this all great? When,
There was pain from
when
both
there was
sides
pain on
that we
both
were
sides.
suppressing.
And we had just met, and Imam Isam was there, and I had just met him. And so I think I just went up to you and
Yeah.
said, I just want to say that I know we're all, we have big smiles and we're all,
Right.
and underneath it, I know that we're all
You were
just-
drawn to Asma? Is that what?
We happened to be sitting next to
Oh,
each
I
other.
see.
at
Okay,
the-
got it.
But also
we were
representing
the Jewish
and the Muslim world,
communities.
sure.
Right.
And I just said, we can't just be here and not acknowledge that we're both really
hurting.
and frightened and angry. And we just had this moment of acknowledging, yes, we share that. That's it. We didn't talk about what,
Yeah.
You know what,
It
you
was
didn't
just
have to.
that.
Therein lies the breakthrough, right there. That honesty and that vulnerability
Yeah.
to share between two people.
And there was a part healing, the fact that we were communicating. And I think
Right.
that's another premise of why we are here, because we want to transcend that to the other side and to your viewers,
Yes,
that a
absolutely.
dialogue goes far.
Right, that's right. I mean, it was maybe a 5-10 minute
Yeah.
interaction. It was not, but it felt so important
Yeah.
and deep to just look at each other and say, we're really hurting and we're really scared. right? Like it was, and we're angry. Like that was an important thing also to acknowledge that.
And at that
like,
moment, I don't mean to interrupt you, you opened the door to possibility at that very
right,
moment,
right, right,
Yeah, we were checking each other's realities.
right.
which is
Right.
amazing.
Although you weren't sure where this might take you, correct?
But there was a
Yes.
sense of positive and yet vulnerability place
Right.
that we were connected.
Right.
Like the room sort of went blank and it was just her. Like I needed her as much as she needed me.
Right,
And I think that's the same as the community as well.
right.
The both hurting communities just sort of need to have this dialogue to
Absolutely.
That's
heal
right.
one another.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we were both, I think, so immersed in the trauma of each of our own communities. I mean, I was carrying it
Yeah.
so heavily in my heart, and I thought the two of you, as you know, the Imam
Yeah.
Islam as well, like had to have been carrying that as well.
Right. That was
And
just
here we are, it's Thanksgiving, and it's gratitude, and it's
Right.
happy, and we're together, and and that's true. And underneath is also true.
yeah.
That
And that
there's-
was so recent of that 6-year-old being murdered by the caregiver. Or the neighbor rather, and I have 2 kids, 5 and 7 now, and it was everything was just so real, although hidden by a cloth of let's not talk about it.
Right, right,
It's that fear of being vulnerable with another human being.
right.
And that gets in the way all the time. Nothing can happen without that.
Yeah.
And you both realized that. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And had the courage to break past it.
Yeah.
Do you find that
Yeah.
that's been the case by the community reaction, as Barbara's saying, the fear of being vulnerable? Why has not that, or tell me, is that dialogue that you two had continuing in the larger community? And if so, how? And if not, what can we do to have that happen?
I think knowledge goes far. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of naiveness. There's a lot of I don't know the other party. I can't speak of it. I think, as long as one is educating the other and one is not so naive, then I think there can be a dialogue, in my sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say also, we have to be real about how hard this is, right? It takes an investment of time to get to know each other, to build trust. Like you can't, most people can't just immediately have that, we did, but it doesn't usually happen that way. And it was a very brief interaction, like to really get into hard conversations. And I want to say, one of the reasons why I was involved in founding my congregation is we want to sit in that place. We want to be a congregation that's about going to the realest, deepest,
Intimacy.
challenging, pressing questions of life, right?
Right.
Like, what does it mean to be a human being? That's hard. And it takes time to build relationship and to build trust. And it takes managing, both sides there's plenty of multi-generational trauma to go around.
Yeah.
We're all wounded in various ways.
Yes, yeah.
And the trauma is being continually reactivated by both the media that you talked about already, and by the extremists. And extremism empowers extremism.
And lack of courageous leadership.
Yes, I mean, we need courageous
Political
leadership.
and perhaps religious too.
Yes, but we also need, what happens when the rhetoric gets amped up and people feel like, they want to kill me.
Yeah.
Right? And we have rhetoric like that on both sides, right?
The fear.
Then the walls go up, the fear go up, and then it becomes, if I acknowledge someone else's pain, then I'm somehow either disloyal or I'm opening the door to actions that scare me, right? And when I think about how I talk about this as a rabbi, right? Like what I know about military strategy is nothing. What I know about how to bring hostages home is less than nothing. What I know about the human heart, right? That's where my role
Beautiful.
is, right? And so I try to distinguish when I want to take people to hard places between what we're able to feel and acknowledge and strategy implications for that result from that. Like, we can talk about
Right.
pain on both sides, as we did that night,
Yeah.
without either of us having to take a position on what anyone should do
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Israel and Gaza.
so,
Yeah. What can
Right?
we do at home?
What can
right
we
here?
do with us?
Yeah.
and need to prepare people to be at this level that you two are able to do, to be, right?
I think that's with exposure. I'm a physician who makes house calls, and just more recently, I was in a house and had to pronounce someone who passed away. And I asked, well, what's the next, process? And the wife, who was of not practicing but Christian background, said, my late husband is of Jewish faith. But her insistence was that he be cremated. And the knowledge is where this comes in. And I said, well, I'm not sure if that is the knowledge I have about cremation and Judaism, but you are the next of kin, you're the healthcare proxy, you get to make the decision, but would you like to speak with a rabbi? And I did connect them with my friends and rabbi from Manhattan, and there's one in Sag Harbor, and a conversation happened. And as to what they ended up doing, that's private to them. But if I was not aware of it, and if the wife did not know that in Judaism cremation may not be it for that family, it would have led to different results. But one thing is that I think knowing one another really helps, because we are in a world that's multinational, religious, sex, gender. I mean, just we are everyone and individual on one planet. So this is not one race, religion. We have to exist with our differences and live and survive.
Right. Yeah.
How are you able to, amidst all this fear and conflict, I mean, it permeates the atmosphere. How are you able to sustain living and coming from your heart? It's not an easy place. I mean,
Look, I think it's practice, right? This is what spiritual practice, what characterological practice is about. And I think a lot about, sort of managing reactivity, right? And some of that involves, for example, limiting exposure to social media, right? If you sit on social media before you go to bed at night, right? And at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or midnight, you're there scrolling, and our feeds are tailored to evoke our particular fears. You go to bed at night feeling, like I would go to bed at night feeling that anti-Semitism is everywhere. And it's happening all the time.
I'm paranoid.
Right? And the reality is, what I'm seeing are the same couple of incidents over and over and over and over again. And it's not everywhere, right? And I think there's a tremendous role for leadership, religious leadership certainly, but leadership across the board, right? And physicians are very important leaders in the community. Like, the power that you have in people's vulnerable moments, right? The power that we have to help people calm and regulate and assess what they're seeing. Because when we're activated like that, we get stupid. We make poor decisions. We act out of fear and
Fear-based.
anger,
right.
and we lash out, and we feel
And
self-protected.
prejudice.
Right, and we feel self-protective, and right, and it's human. It's not like it's nobody's fault. It's human.
Yeah.
But it takes effort to say, wait a minute, how do I want to be in my world, and what do I need to do to be able to be that person and be a force of calm, of peace, of connection, which doesn't mean, and I want to be really clear about this because it's important, and I think this is something that we value in each other. It doesn't mean denial. Right? It doesn't mean there are no problems, it's all fine,
right.
we're all the same. We're not all the same. And
Right.
there are real problems, and there are real conflicts, and there are genuine threats. And we have to have eyes wide open, right? It means being thoughtful and responsive and open and not reactive and fearful and, right? It's not denial, it's presence.
I just want to add to this. So during Ramadan, we had fast breaking every night for 30 days. And one of these days, I decided that we should have a rabbi at the iftar. And why not? And this is just more recently, and we called whomever could make it to that day. And rabbi from, I believe, either Montauk or Riverhead had replied, and one of them did come. And I kid you not, but the congregation that we were breaking fast of 100 people, more than half had come up to me and they said, we have never spoken a word to a rabbi before.
Really?
And wow, he sounds like our imam.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so we just now took that gap of, not knowing and that fear of, the
fear of
other. And here's the curtain now that's all gone. And here you go. Here's a rabbi. Just that conversation. And I have to give credit to Rabbi Dan from Sag Harbor. He broke that fear of unknown with me when there's a great person of this community that has been doing iftars for several years before my husband and I ever started this Islamic center. And they were having iftar every year just so the Muslims and non-Muslims can get together and just appreciate this day. And Rabbi Dan and Jim, I'm blanking out the name.
When it came from Riverhead?
Our Santa Claus.
Oh, Ken.
Oh, Ken.
Ken Dorff.
Yeah.
Oh my God, love that man. So, these guys have gotten together
Yep.
before the Islamic Center even established itself. And when I first met Rabbi Dan, I was like, oh, I've never met a rabbi before. Hello. And he was just so welcoming and so loving. And I just realized that experience that I had, I want that to be transcended and other people to experience it. Because we are humans. We are just
Absolutely.
people.
It's not easy because everything in the world strengthens the notion of the other, whether it's film, politics, the news, right? All the time.
Yeah, it's great to not fall for that though. I may
Yes,
have
I know.
just lived in no fear and let's just,
Yeah.
just be friendly.
As you were talking, I attended, I think it was a Thanksgiving service, Rabbi William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign held this.
Reverend.
I'm sorry.
I'm happy to claim him.
Yeah, right.
I mean, as a colleague.
I was gonna say rabbi.
Would that he were, but he's not, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Reverend William Barber,
Reverend
he's
William
terrific,
held, I think it was the first service in a mosque, Thanksgiving service in Philadelphia, and I was attending there. Doesn't that just occur to me as you were speaking too, and correct me if I'm maybe paraphrasing this wrong. David Ben-Gurion, founding father of Israel, when he made a peace treaty or our trade pact with Germany, not very much, I think within 10 years after the Holocaust, he caught all kinds of hell. But he said, we need to know history, never forget it, but also, and also forget it. Know when to forget it, and know when to bury the hatchet, always being aware so we can go ahead and open up our hearts.
Look, I think what you're getting at in
Yeah,
part
help
is
me.
the question of what role does the past play, right? And I think that we can get stuck obsessing about the past. There's a really important role in peace work of understanding each other's narratives and origin stories and listening and giving people a chance to tell the story. And right, you can't skip that step. It's important. But ultimately, the fight over what happened in the past is not going to move us to the future. Right? Ultimately, we have to decide what is the future we want to work toward and what's going to get us there. And, we live in a society where in all kinds of ways, we have this fantasy that everything bad that happens can be fixed. You bring a lawsuit and you're going to win and you're going to get that is going to fix it, right? The doctor is going to be able to diagnose absolutely everything and fix everything, right? We have this fantasy that everything broken can just be fixed. not everything that is broken can be repaired. What we can do is move forward with broken hearts
Yeah.
in a way that allows us to live whole lives, right? And that's very different from saying we're going to repair all the, right? I think it's important that we hear each other's
Point of views.
point of views and history and
Sure.
pain and the ways in which we were each wronged. But ultimately, it's not about recompense.
Right.
It's about what do we want in our world going forward? What do we want for us and our kids and our grandchildren?
Getting us away from the idea of vengeance and retribution,
Right,
because that's nowhere, because it
Right.
never ends.
right.
You did this to me, and I
Right.
did it. It's punishment, and then the whole criminal
Right.
justice system is based on it, but that's a whole
Yeah,
other
which
thing.
is
Have
different
some
than justice, right? Justice
Yes.
is different than vengeance,
Right.
right? And there are
Justice is what
things
love
that
looks
can-
like in public.
Yeah, okay, right,
Right.
yeah, right, exactly.
Cornell West, all
Right,
right, all
right.
right.
But I think that's right, that like holding on to and nurturing a sense of being victims.
Yeah.
Is not gonna move us forward to what we want ongoingly. And that's true in the crisis in Israel and Gaza and the West
Yeah.
Bank, and it's true in America, it's true across the world, right? We have to figure out what we want going forward and how to get there.
Yeah, well said. I would think that courage for forgiveness is a very big thing also at this moment in time. Because we're between stories right now.
Mm.
The old story is fading so quickly. We haven't even begun to create the new one. So we are in this, it's almost like a parallel universe. We're
Mhm.
in this void. How do we, and to discover the capacities within us to move it forward and create the new story.
Right.
It's a very vulnerable space to be in right now.
Right. I would call it a black hole. Let's get out of it. You know,
It's more-
There are
politically.
limitations,
It's more
aren't
of a
there?
void.
Aren't there limitations? How do you forgive Hamas? for
Well,
October
so,
7th?
right,
Or
so,
when does that start?
yeah, so, look, I
How do
think
we
we're talking
forgive-
about two different things.
Yeah, go
right?
ahead.
One, there are times in history or in an individual's life when paradigms fall apart. Right, things break down, this is one of those
It's
moments.
happening now.
I'm most interested in hearing from the people who are sitting in that, okay, everything we thought we knew and we thought we believed is wrong. We gotta learn some new things. Right? That's, I think, the most helpful, hopeful, creative place to be. The question of forgiveness is complicated. And we as a rabbi, we're approaching the High Holy Days. This is our season for that.
Mm.
I'm always very careful about pressuring my community to forgive and of seeing forgiveness as a precondition to moving forward. Because sometimes there are things that can't be forgiven, and sometimes there are people who just aren't ready and may never be ready to forgive. We can move forward, nevertheless, right? There's a difference between forgiving and releasing one's claims for vengeance, right? Forgiveness is complicated. I think there are
complicated.
things
It
that
depends.
can't necessarily, in one's individual life and on the national stage, that I don't want to put a responsibility on those who have been hurt to forgive, especially when they're the one who caused the pain is not atoning.
Well,
Yeah.
as
Right.
long as it's not driving one's life, I think that's the difference.
Right. One can make a choice
Right.
with what one does with hurt, even if one is not ready to forgive. And I think the more that we open spaces that can hold the full breadth and depth of the human condition and the experience of the heart, the more space there is to find a connection. When we don't tell people, well, you can't bring anger into the room, or you can't bring, right? Then we're already,
Right.
we're not real anymore,
Right, I agree.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think the more we can create communities where people can
Safety.
yeah. I mean, the conversations we have in our community are really extraordinary, where people feel free to say things like, I'm feeling feelings that really scare me. When did I become this person?
Mhm.
Right? Like, I don't want to feel what I'm feeling, but I have to acknowledge I do. That's a real conversation. From there, we can grow. From there,
Sure.
we can.
That's very powerful.
Right? That's very powerful.
Wow.
And very courageous to acknowledge about myself, right? I'm not going to pretend that I'm not angry. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not frightened, or I'm not going to pretend that I don't sometimes want vengeance. I'm just not going to act on that.
Right. It is a healing phase. Acknowledging is the first, and then there's multi-layered ways to get to where you need to be. But, right, we can't just dismiss
Right,
the inner feeling.
right.
You seem like well, we all do, but you seem like an individual who has very little anger in you. I mean, I'm not trying to, I know we only got a minute or two left.
Yeah, we do.
But, no, take by the bell, right? But, you know, like, what Barbara was saying, what anger is there still?
No, none. Life is short. Happiness comes from within. And what matters to me the most is family, then friends, then community. And that's what I can, in myself, control. And that's the positive message that I want to transcend. There's a lot of atrocities happening worldwide. We keep talking about Israel and Gaza. There's Ukraine and Russia. There's multiple civil wars in Africa, South
Things
America.
happening right here in our community.
In our own community, right? I want to be a best friend to someone despite them wanting Trump or Biden Harris. And I don't want to hold that against them. And
Exactly.
same thing with different
Exactly
views.
right.
And and that's what I wish to have my children grow up and know and learn from Jim and I, because I feel like that's where positivity is and that's where longevity is.
And just, we are running out of time, but the generosity of spirit and love and openness that you've created and brought to our show here, please
Yes.
tell us a little about that.
Words can go far, but we actually want to put it to action. So
Okay.
our community is missing a Middle Eastern spice store.
Food is love.
So Jim and I just took on a lease, and we are going to be presenting from, Turkish coffee to Moroccan tea to Israeli couscous
Beautiful.
to dates from all over the Middle East. And I think
in
what better
Bridgehampton?
way
Is it
in
gonna-
Bridgehampton? That's right, next to my medical office.
When's it gonna open?
Labor Day weekend.
Wow.
All right,
So let's bring in the Middle East to us.
knocking down the doors.
I have one more quick question
sure.
for our audience.
I'll pour the coffee.
What would you suggest to the audience for them to do to manage and get through their fears at this very moment in time?
Acknowledge the
'Cause
fears.
There's a lot going on right now that's really stopping people from having conversations.
Sure. Just know trust the other party. It's okay to feel what you're feeling, discuss it, and the other party has to acknowledge and validate what's happening, not necessarily agree with it. We're not on the world or on earth to agree every difference that we have. We just need to know there are differences, but we can coexist.
It's great. And putting yourself in someone else's shoes all the time.
Yeah.
You touched on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, how to manage fear is a big question.
Yes,
That's,
But there's
and
so much out there right
there's
now.
so much fear out there. I think part of it also involves really managing what we allow ourselves to consume and what we take in and what we credit. And taking steps to calm down and to interrogate when the fear rises, right? What's triggering this fear? What's real? What's being churned for me? What do I need to do to calm myself down so that I can look a little bit at this fear and say, okay, how serious is this threat immediately?
Mhm.
And then I think engaging in things that give us hope. Human connection is number one. Like the number one thing is human connection.
Absolutely.
You connect with another person,
Right.
automatically we feel better.
Absolutely.
But look for the things that create hope. It's a both end. There's a lot of scary stuff going on in the world. And there's a lot of amazing, beautiful, wonderful,
Right.
hopeful, positive, nurturing, healing things going on in the world.
Calming tea.
Oh, there we go.
And I would-
go.
And
Along with the
And
Turkish
that's why-
delight, can we also put in an order for some Greek baklava?
That's right.
All right, why not, okay, and
And
some.
I just want to add one more thing. It
Thank you
sounds
so
like you
much.
take the time for inner stillness as well,
Absolutely.
which I think is
Absolutely.
probably more
Very
critical now than
important.
ever.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Thank you so very, very much for being on the show.
Thank
It's been
you.
wonderful, beautiful. Great
Great
love.
show all.
Great
Thank
love.
you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Stay real, keep it real.